Hey guys, welcome back to our weekly roundup of comics. Let's take a look at some of the comics that came out this week, starting with Batgirl number 2. Now again, Batgirl does for me what Detective Comics can't. The art from Lee Garbett, Trevor Scott, and Sandra Hope is clean and fluid, whereas Detective often looks too stiff and a little plasticky. The story is a tad jumbled, like the life of a teenager transitioning into adulthood, and unlike Kate Kane, Stephanie Brown comes through Brian Q. Miller's writing like a likable, though flawed, hero. Additionally, Miller isn't afraid to shake up the status quo with Barbara Gordon looking on with a little twinge of jealousy as a new Batgirl emerges. Again, this issue makes me wonder why I still bother to even read Detective Comics anymore these days. Batman and Robin number 4. Philip Tan steps into the void left by the departure of Frank Quitely, and shows that he's no slouch when it comes to rendering the cesspool known as Gotham City. The only problem is that the story he's given to tell doesn't tell much of a story. I generally like Grant Morrison's storytelling. He tends to jump cut from one scene to another, leaving the reader to race along behind him attempting to piece the story together. Unfortunately, this issue felt like a lot of the pieces didn't really seem to fit. Perhaps it'll all make sense at the end of this arc, but any new readers jumping on now will feel like they must have missed a lot of setup last issue, when really, they are just as clueless as readers from issue 1. Blackest Night number 3. Jeff Johns has decided that after 2 issues of horror movie fun, it was time to slow things down a bit and explain a few things. Now, luckily, the explanations don't reek of desperation or contriteness. The only real problem with the book is the cookie-cutter dialogue between Barry Allen and Hal Jordan. Reeking of the mind-numbingly awfulness that was hard-traveling heroes, they preach to each other in the worst possible way. It's only a page or so, but it's a page that's a long, hard slog to get through. Despite this, Johns does something here that no other writer has been able to do for years. He makes Firestorm interesting, and that alone is worth the price of admission. Dark Reign, The List, Daredevil. As Norman Osborn gets more and more proactive in his fight against the heroes of the Marvel Universe, Daredevil finds himself as too much of a threat for Osborn to ignore. Andy Diggle has put something together here that feels like the perfect crossover of Osborn's story and Murdoch's story, without shoehorning the characters together. As Daredevil's own series seemed caught in a self-loathing loop for too long, the glimpses we get into where the series is headed into the next year or so finally makes me excited for the character again. Dark Wolverine 78. Now I know that many of you hate Dakin because he represents a sales gimmick supplanting the main character of a book with a secondary character, but Dakin is such a fun villain that I don't care. Get over yourselves, people. Give this book a chance. Issue 78 brings a thematic twist as we see how Dakin, the manipulator's world, is starting to get manipulated against him. You know, villain-centric books are hard to sell because no one wants to see the villain win. But when the villain is pitted against less cool villains that you want to see fail, it becomes easier to root for the bad guy. Issue 78 gives me yet another reason to root for Dakin. Walking Dead 65. Now, I've quit and restarted Walking Dead more often than Charlie Sheen has quit and restarted Rational Thought. But this issue is one of those where you can't help but feel like finally these people are getting the upper hand. There's only so much losing you can take before you lose trust in your team. Except apparently for Cubs fans, right? But characters in Walking Dead have faced so many setbacks that I'm kind of surprised that any of them are still alive. But the end of this issue is one that literally made me squeal with glee and happy to be a Walking fan reader these days. Beasts of Burden number 1. For the lack of a better term, the small town of Burden Hill is a hellmouth. It's a center for mysterious paranormal activity. And who's there to investigate matters? Why, the local dogs and one cat. Why not? Who else would do it? You know, the art by Jill Thompson in this book is painted to feel more like a Hallmark after-school special, which makes scenes like the one where the giant demonic frog explodes all the more surreal. But it's really the writing by Evan Dorkin that makes you... Wait a minute. Evan Dorkin? The milk and cheese guy? Really? Huh. Well, anyway, his story here is one part Pet Cemetery, one part Hellboy, and one part Lassie. The final result is a book which might seem a smidgen confusing for anyone not already familiar with the characters who appeared in several backup stories over the years, but it's more endearing than you're probably willing to admit, and well worth checking out. Well, that's all the time we have for reviews today. I want to thank you for checking us out, and don't forget to stop by VGLosers.com. Besides finding a community within our forum that you can interact with, we also have lots of other interesting stuff we talk about. Toys, video games, pro wrestling, MMA, TV shows, you name it. If it's got a geeky nerd bent to it, we probably discuss it in one place or another. We've got podcast videos and articles, so make sure you stop on by and check us out. See you guys next week.